Not even a little bit. Anyways, Scott Perry's press conference was yesterday.
That's right.
James Ham was there at Golden One Center. He got asked a lot about Doug Christie's, or not Doug Christie specifically, but the coach and who's going to be the Kings' next head coach. Because as of right now, they don't really have a head coach. Doug Christie was the interim head coach.
I believe I specifically asked about Doug Christie and the coaching search.
Yes.
I said, is Doug Christie going to be the guy, or are we going to have a full-blown coaching search?
Right.
To open the press conference.
Right.
Yeah, like, look, I think there's a lot to, like, look at here. Like, first of all, when Scott Perry was the guy that was announced, a lot of people just assumed because Scott Perry was announced as the new general manager that meant that Doug would be back.
Mm-hmm.
And that still very well could be the case. Like, Doug has a lot of friends in high places in the Kings organization.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because he's a good dude and because he's been around forever and because he's part of the past.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also been part of the broadcast. He's got a huge following with the fan base, and he's a very popular guy in Sacramento. But that doesn't mean that's what Scott Perry believes is what's best for his franchise.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, Vivek owns the franchise, but who's responsible for wins and losses now is Scott Perry. And so he's going to do what he kind of feels is right. He's talked to Doug a couple of times, according to Scott Perry yesterday. Not only that, but a lot of the attributes that Doug brings to the table are things that he certainly, that Scott Perry is looking for. He wants a defensive-minded coach. He wants somebody who can connect with players. He wants somebody who has an identity of playing hard and, like what he described as Doug Christie as a player.
Dude, he described, so just to I'm going to tie the NFL draft in here for a second because it felt exactly the same. John Lynch got asked on Tuesday about defensive end prospects or what the 49ers look for in a defensive end. And then he went on to just describe Mykel Williams, the defensive end from Georgia. Just described him as a player.
Mm-hmm.
That to me was what Scott Perry did when talking about the coaching search yesterday. He was like, I want somebody who's going to have a tough-minded team that is defensive focused and that shares the basketball. It was like, I know a guy.
That's Doug Christie.
I know the guy. I know exactly who he needs. And that jumped out to me. The fact that he said he's got to talk to a few people, but he expects a resolution in the next week.
Yeah.
That to me is, I read that as, and if you think different, let me know. But I read that as, this is Doug's job to lose. I'm going to confirm with a couple of people because I haven't been in the building that we're all cool with Doug and that's going to be the choice. Now, if he goes to somebody, and I don't think this will happen, but if he went to some decision maker and they were like, hey, we need to, I don't know, then maybe they expand the search a little bit.
I think a bigger issue is if you sit down with the players and you have individuals who have some questions about the direction and they're not comfortable with Doug Christie being the head coach, or they have qualifiers like, hey, Doug can be the guy. We're okay with Doug being the guy, but you had better load up his coaching staff.
Mm-hmm.
And again, part of it's just because Doug Christie doesn't have the experience.
Sure.
Like JJ Redick didn't have the experience either, and Chauncey Billups didn't have the experience either. But you surround those guys with really, really good assistant coaches to support them, and that's what you should do. I mean, like, Doug should be coming up with offensive schemes and defensive schemes for himself. He should have ideas for himself, but he should also have guys who have done that in the league for the last 20 years or 15 years in the league, building out offenses and defenses for NBA coaches. And so, like, you need a really good staff, and that's whether Doug is here or not. But if it is Doug, you need an even better staff than you would with like a veteran head coach with like Mike Brown. Right. So you're hoping that would be the next step. But like, look, I think we're going to hear all kinds of things in the next week or two, and we'll see how this thing plays out. I would be surprised if they have an announcement quick, it's probably Doug. If they don't have an announcement quickly, we're going to start hearing about a full-fledged coaching search and what does that mean for Doug and all that. Then it's going to get complicated.
If we get to Wednesday is the date I set in my head.
Okay.
If by next Wednesday, so that would be the 30th, April 30th. If we haven't heard anything about the Kings are closing in on someone, or if we've heard nothing by Wednesday, that's when I'm gonna think, oh, okay, there's a larger search going on.
Well, that and like the NBA circles are really small when it comes to coaching.
Mm-hmm.
So if we haven't already started hearing at least some names mentioned, or that it isn't a foregone conclusion that he's going there or something like that,
Yeah.
We'll start to hear some murmurs.
Yeah.
Like, oh, like so and so is interested in their job, or has or the Kings have called.
Yeah, the Kings have expressed interest in Coach X.
Yeah, to check in. And then we're all going to be left with this idea like, well, is that for a head coaching job or is it for the lead assistant job? Like, what is it? I've said it yesterday on D-Lo and KC. Like, Dave Yeager's name has been mentioned in Sacramento quite a few times in the last 2 weeks.
Now, you say that, but you also said this Scott Perry's name kept coming up.
Oh, yeah, Scott Perry's name had come up for 6 weeks. Yeah, at least.
Is that how Dave Yeager's name is coming up? Or is it just like, yeah, if it's not Doug, here's a name to keep an eye on?
No, it's just like randomly you start hearing, oh, and then you start checking around and be like, yeah, I've heard that too.
Huh.
And outside of the walls and, around. So I would say, and again, I don't know that means Dave Yeager for a head coach or Dave Yeager for an assistant coach. But when you look at Scott Perry as, his time with Sacramento is 2017, that was Dave Yeager's team.
Yeah.
He worked with Dave for those 3 months while they were prepping for the draft. Although I will say that there's something that happens in that draft that Dave Yeager and his group really, really, really wanted Kyle Kuzma over Justin Jackson, and that didn't happen. Well, they lost out, and that's because Kyle Kuzma, number one, had played at Utah for Larry Kristowiak, who was a minor league coach forever, and also like a vagabond, like big man in the NBA for a while, right? Well, Larry had ties with all of the Kings coaching staff who had coached in the minor leagues. And he kept telling everybody, hey, man, this Kyle Kuzma kid's amazing. They had Kyle Kuzma in for a workout, and he absolutely blew the doors off of Justin Jackson. And the Kings,
what a weird thing.
And the Kings didn't take him.
Dude, front offices are, that's the other, just again, not to make this about the NFL draft, but that happens in, front offices are dumb.
Yeah.
No, I shouldn't say that. Front offices will do dumb things all the time. Like, hey, every sign says we should draft this guy, but you know what? We're vibing with Justin Jackson.
That's why I always bring up like the Damian Lillard thing. He showed up one day, he hit all but one shot. Like, that's what they said. He hit like something like in the 90s of his shot.
Ridiculous.
Out of 100 shots. Like, they were like, this kid is unbelievable. Going into the draft, the night before the draft, I was told by someone inside, they're taking Damian Lillard. The next day, they get to the draft, Thomas Robinson falls, and this was because Dion Waiters, who again is one of those weird guys who he wouldn't work out for anybody, was slated to go in the 20s, and all of a sudden he goes number 4 and pushes Thomas Robinson to number 5. The Kings can't get a commitment from the Maloofs as to whether they at least can sign Jason Thompson back, and so they don't even have a power forward at all on the roster. So instead of drafting Damian Lillard, they draft Thomas Robinson because they at least knew they would be able to fill one of their roles that they needed. And then,
what a nightmare.
And then the Maloofs gave them money for Jason Thompson. And, like, you should never, first of all, you should never make a draft decision based on Jason Thompson. And that's not,
that's a great point.
That's not to be disrespectful to Jason Thompson, but that should never happen.
No, you shouldn't be making draft decisions based on players who aren't all NBA guys.
Nope. And it doesn't matter if they're in their 3rd season or 4th season, whatever it is. But these are mistakes that are made. So anyway, like, to get back to the question at hand, the Doug Christie question, I don't know like what they're going to do here, but I do think it's been leaning a specific way for a while.
Feels like it.
Like, Doug was not in the room yesterday because I think it would have been a distraction. Vivek also wasn't in the room yesterday because I think he knows it could have possibly been a
It
distraction.
100% would have been.
And there were a lot of people in the room, like Matina, John Reinhardt, like all of the training staff. Most of the coaches that are still in town were all there. Like there were a ton of people in the room. I mean, the place was packed. So it's noticeable that those guys aren't there. But again, I'm not going to make some, massive conclusion because the first thing that everyone would have done if Vivek was in the room was as soon as Scott Perry got done talking, they would have raced to Vivek.
Like, for sure.
Or race to Doug. Like they would have, okay, let's follow up.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't have those guys in the room.
Sam Amick said on a different program today. Sam Amick said on some weird show, I don't know, that it may be, if they go with Doug Christie, it may be a short-term deal or a long-term deal with options built in. Would that be, I want to start here. Whether that is how they would do this or not is secondary to what I want to ask now.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that would be prohibitive? If Doug Christie and Rich Paul walk in and say, need a 4-year deal, or that's the standard, we had a 4-year deal worth X dollars a year, that's what we're going to do here. And if Vivek's like, well, we don't know if you can coach yet. Like, you did a nice job, but we don't know what this looks like for 82 games. We don't want to commit to 4 years of this. So how about 2 years or 4 years with options after years 2 and 3?
Okay, so
would Doug go, I don't want to be the head coach here then?
No, and I think that's the leverage that the Kings have. Like, everybody knows Doug wants a job.
Mm-hmm.
Doug also wants a job with a paycheck.
Of course.
Like he wants to be the guy who leads his team
to
an NBA championship. Yep. He's also a guy who would love to make NBA head coaching money. Like, who wouldn't?
Mm-hmm.
Whether like that's a starting salary around $5 million or it's $7 million or it's $9 million, the Kings will probably try to keep it around 4 or 5 to start because he isn't proven as a head coach, right? But coaching salaries have gone up quite a bit. And so that'll be the first thing. As far as like a 2-year commitment with a 3rd-year option and a 4th-year option, I will tell you this, that the Kings, when they went to sign Mike Brown to his original contract, their first offer was a 3-year deal with a 4th-year team option. And Mike turned that down and said, I will take a 3-year deal with a 4th-year mutual option. And the Kings were like, oh, well, that's fine. We'll do that's okay. Fine. We'll negotiate, and we'll give you the mutual option.
Right.
Well, that's what came back to bite him in the behind, because when we got done with year 2, and well, let me think. No, you got done with year 3.
Right.
Mike was no, it was year 2. When you got done with year 2, Mike was told the Kings, I'm opting out of year 4. And so that meant he would go into last season as a lame duck, which is why they went and gave him an extension. They gave him a pay raise and an extension. But again, that's on them. Like, most coaches get a 4-year deal. I mean, the Phoenix Suns have been handing out 5-year deals every year to a new head coach who doesn't work there anymore.
Yeah.
So like they're stacking up 5 years worth of deals. Like, the Kings are on the hook for the next 2 years for Mike Brown. And that's something that will like play a role in what they do here. But that means you're at least getting Doug Christie for 2 years. Because if they're going to buy him on they're not going to fire Doug. If Doug is the guy, you're not going to fire Doug after 1 year.
You'd hope not.
And then go into that next year where you're paying Mike Brown, Doug Christie, and some other dude that's coaching the team now. So it gets really, really complicated.
And isn't this the last year of Luke Walton?
No, Luke Walton's deal's over.
Oh, is it?
He had a 4-year deal, and they fired him midway through his 3rd year. So Mike Brown's first year, they were paying 2.
Okay.
Yeah. But so that means they went through like 1 year where they truly weren't paying 2 coaches, because they did, when you raise someone to an interim position from an assistant, you do have to give them more money. I don't think that Doug Christie will take a 2-year deal, a make good 2-year deal, because his agent is Rich Paul, and there's a reason why you give Rich Paul a percentage of your money, and that's to negotiate those deals.
Right.
I don't see that there's a way that you're not going to at least get a 3-year deal. I would at least be shocked.
The thing for me is whoever it is, whether it's because Doug is the guy who doesn't have the experience, so we'll just say it's Doug. You have to do that if you're the Kings, because you have to give him the runway to figure this out. There's going to be some turbulence with the roster. There's going to be some ups and downs during this transition. There's going to be some ups and downs with him as a coach as he continues figuring this thing out.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I kept coming back to yesterday when talking about with the Scott Perry press conference. It's like, okay, this all sounds good. You need to just let him cook for a couple of years. You need to let this thing build and grow, and you need to let it have its ebbs and flows. And there's going to be peaks and there's going to be valleys, and every valley can't be, oh my God, panic, coach is on the hot seat.
Yep.
Give him the 3-year deal and let him have 3 years.
Yeah.
Be like, hey, you know what? We're not doing, I don't care how bad this year goes. I don't care how bad next year goes. In 25, 26, 27, 20, 26, 27, the 27-28 season, Doug Christie will be our head coach to at least start the season. Let this thing play out, man. So that's what I hope. I hope they don't do the, okay, well, we'll do 2 years and then we'll give you an option. And then we're like, no, man, just.
And if you're not convinced, then go find the coach that you're sold on.
That's it.
That's, I mean, realistically,
that's
if
what
you're
it
not
comes
convinced, like, and hey, I understand both sides. Like, I think Doug's done a good job, but at the same time, I also think, look, there's a possibility here that you find a coach that's seasoned and that you have just more trust and faith in because you've seen him do it before.
Yep. That's it.
Yeah.
If you're not certain, then find the guy you're certain about.
Yep.
Absolutely. All right.